Yeah, this is another riveting episode of the Cafe Americain podcast. I'm your intrepid host, Chris Michaels, and we are one of the beauties about having my own podcast and having pretty much all of the say of whatever I talk about is exactly that, is that I can talk about whatever I want to talk about. So I have had the pleasure this week in being able to see one of the crystal skulls that's out there. There are a lot of crystal skulls that are out there, but I saw one of four very, very old, ancient crystal skulls. So if any of you have seen the most recent Indiana Jones atrocity that they tried to categorize as a movie, that's what this is based off of. So a lot of people that made that movie, like Steven Spielberg and others, decided to actually try to communicate with the skull and the people that are in possession of it. When the movie was made, it was, I guess it was debuted somewhere in France, I would assume Cannes, and these individuals went over there because they possessed said skull to meet all sorts of fantastically wealthy people who portray themselves as normal folks, yet they are really occultists. Your intrepid host, Chris Michaels, studies the occult. Now, let me tell you something about the word occult. Occult pretty much means hidden. So if I put my face behind a handkerchief, guess what? My face is now occult. That's all it means. It doesn't mean that I'm out there summoning demons and worshiping the devil. Quite the opposite. But I do have a firm understanding of energy and how this world works, and also how reality works and said universe, which reality lies in. So, having said that, I do a lot of energy work. I do a lot of things that people would consider esoteric. So I'm a Reiki master. I read tarot cards. I go to meditation circles. On occasion, I've been known to channel messages. So when I did see the crystal skull, it was a bit of intimidating. Not entirely, but it was a little bit intimidating. The mythology that surrounds the crystal skull is pretty unique. They found it, they being the people that were in the possession of it, they found it in Central America in a buried temple. Now, the temple had to be unearthed because the foliage and ground cover, oddly enough, covered all of it. Said temple. Once they found the temple and decided to crack it open, they realized that they were staring at something way, way down there. And said thing that was glistening in the dark was the crystal skull. So they lowered a small individual because the hole kept collapsing. And they eventually got the skull out of the hole. Once they removed the skull, it went through various hands. And eventually, the daughter of the explorer that found the skull possessed it for most of its unearthed time. After that, there was a psychic that decided to work with the daughter. And the psychic is remarkable because when she decides to communicate, she doesn't even I wouldn't even say she communicates with the skull. What happens is that she essentially channels messages through the skull. So energetically, she makes a connection with the skull, and pretty much her consciousness is somewhere else. And she doesn't remember a thing when she is with the skull and performing any sort of channeling exercises with the skull. It's as if you are having a dream and talking in your sleep. Other people can hear the messages, but you yourself do not necessarily remember anything. So she has been working with the skull for decades, and I had the pleasure of meeting her as well. Now, the whole thing behind the skull, we decided to take a look and learn a little bit about how the skull came into existence. And supposedly the skull is one of 13. 4 of the 13 skulls have been unearthed. What's important about these skulls is that they are extremely unique. According to legend, that involves the transcribing of mythology from various tribes that were in charge of protecting the 4 skulls that have been unearthed, or they knew the location of one of the 4 skulls. These skulls were created by 13 masters, and these 13 masters existed before the most recent flood that covered the earth. So we're talking these 13 masters knew that something was coming about, and these 13 masters decided to create these skulls prior to the biblical flood that everybody knows and everybody talks about. Now, the biblical flood took place about 10,000 years ago. So we're talking about 8,000 BC, or maybe 10,000 BC, so maybe 12,000 years ago. It's not that long. So these skulls were supposedly created prior to that, prior to the deluge. Now this puts archaeology and anthropology on its head, because according to experts in anthropological and archaeological fields, mankind didn't really get its head out of its ass until about 6,000 to 8,000 BC, mainly in Iraq, with Babylon and the Tigris and the Euphrates River. Now that in itself is significant, because then you start to realize why the West and the United States invaded Iraq. They wanted to get back to the origins of the most recent flourishing genesis of civilization after the biblical floods. Now, why they wanted to do that is another story indeed, and I don't have time for it. Maybe I'll explain it another time. However, going back to the crystal skulls, these crystal skulls are said to be communication devices. The 13 masters that did create the skulls had the intent of using said skulls to communicate with one another. Obviously, if they are using these skulls for communication, then these skulls are not in the same locations, and they are subsequently planted across the planet. Now, this is very significant because there are no cell phones prior to the deluge. So we're talking about energetic connectivity. We're talking about psychic abilities that these 13 masters had. And we're also talking about the psychic abilities that the human has. But the human refuses to acknowledge their own abilities. They prefer technology because if they use technology, then they don't have to think. They don't have to work at it, and they don't have to exercise their psychic muscles. Legend also has it that the 13 skulls, once they are all unearthed and placed in front of one another, will bring about world peace. It will shift the energy in mankind's consciousness and subconsciousness. It will also shift the energy on the planet Earth and the subsequent frequencies that surround said planet Earth. This is very significant, and I'll tell you why. We are on the precipice of a major, major shift. This is not only located on planet Earth. This is a galactic event. And this is why I told you in the debut episode we talk about exopolitics. Exopolitics doesn't only focus on the mundane, such as, oh, did Trump grab anybody by the pussy? Or did Trump piss or hire prostitutes to piss on a bed that Barack Obama stayed in? Or slept in, I should say. He didn't stay in the bed, he slept on the bed. No, 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 no. We go far, far deeper than that on Cafe Americain. We bring in the esoteric and the occult to really make sense of what's going on this planet right now. So we are starting to see this enormous shift in consciousness, and we are literally on the precipice of totalitarianism or absolute freedom. And all of these wars are all part of it. They're all part of the equation. Think about it. When Barack Obama was president, nobody cared about Russia, mainly because Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama were approving uranium deals with Russia, which was highly illegal. However, in the last couple of months of Barack Obama's presidency, we start to see moves to attack Russia and moves to attack China. All of a sudden, at the end of Barack Obama's presidency and the beginning of Donald Trump's presidency, now we're on the brink of nuclear war. Hillary Clinton was supposed to be elected. However, she wasn't. Donald Trump was. And it turns out that Donald Trump was elected by using Barack Obama's tactics with social media. Had nothing to do with the Russians. It had everything to do with being able to utilize, I hate that word utilize, to use information that was gleaned from Facebook. So now the planet is on the brink of a nuclear war. This is the shift that I'm talking about. This is the crossroads that humanity is going to be looking at within the coming months of 2018. So these crystal skulls are now making the rounds. They are trying to alleviate the pressure amongst the energy points on this planet. Just like you go through acupuncture, and there are certain energy points along the human body that alleviate energetic blockages, the planet Earth also has it's not the same, but something along the same lines. They call them ley lines. So now the crystal skulls are making their way across the planet, attempting to remove the blockages. And in the process, even though we've only had 4 skulls unearthed, we're going to find the other 9 skulls. I forgot 9 and 4 is 13. Now, the number 13 is fairly significant. And there is a reason why there are 13 skulls. And I'll get into that in just a moment.